For centuries, Americans have proudly accepted the Statue of Liberty as a symbol of freedom for America, a symbol of prosperity and hope, a giant beacon to all new immigrants trying to make it in the land of opportunity. But what happens if the Statue of Liberty is not really what we think it is? What if I were to tell you that the Statue of Liberty doesn't just have pagan roots, but that it's also tied to demons, dragons, and possibly the reptilian race as a whole? Sounds crazy, right? Stay tuned to find out why. The Statue of Liberty is one of America's greatest symbols. Yet, do we really understand its roots, what it actually represents? Many have speculated that the architect Gustav Eiffel, who was also contracted to build the Eiffel Tower, was a Freemason. In my research, I believe that this has never been proven. What some people may not be aware, though, is that the Eiffel didn't make the designs for the Statue of Liberty, despite being credited as a structural engineer. The individual who actually designed the statue was sculptor Frédéric Bartholdi, who was a proven Freemason. Bartholdi claimed that he originally got the idea from Edouard René Laboulaye, the president of the French Anti-Slavery Society. This is no surprise, as the Statue of Liberty is currently claimed to have been a representative or a representation of the god Libertas, who was a god that was associated with the freeing of the slaves during the Roman Empire, as well as the personification of Columbia, which is an old poetic name for America. However, upon closer examination, it seems that the Statue of Liberty could have symbolisms that go far beyond the Libertas deity. For example, before Freemason sculptor Frédéric Bartholdi was commissioned to design this statue, he had already designed plans for a giant statue that was planned to have been erected at the Suaz canal in Egypt, but it was never really completed. This statue was said to have been comprised of a massive draped figure holding a torch, which is a variation of the Colossus of Rhodes, one of the seven wonders, and is also a representation of the Greek Titan sun god Helios, or Apollo. If you're curious what Colossus of Rhodes used to look like when it stood, well, this is it. What's interesting is that the Helios is holding a rod, which in the Roman Empire was a symbol for Libertas, and was actually even used in the ceremonies for freeing the slaves. In other words, the symbolism between Helios and Libertas, it's tough to tell apart, because they both basically use a rod as a symbol. In ancient mythology, there was a god named Attis, who was said to have been resurrected from the death of the mother of all mother deities, Cybele. Now let me show you an image of how Cybele is depicted. Do you see the resemblance? Look at the Statue of Liberty. I mean, look at her crown. In my opinion, the crown of the Statue of Liberty can be construed as a mix of the crown of Cybele and the sun crown of Attis or Helios. So, could the Statue of Liberty be the combination of two deities? I actually think so. I mean, outside of the fact that the Statue of Liberty looks very androgynous, think about the actual history of the designer of the statue. What's even more interesting is that when you examine the ancient gods of the Mithra mystery religion, to which there's no surviving scripture of their religion, you notice even more similarities. Take a look. This is what their god looked like. And here is that same Helios type representation of the god, but represented as a lion. The reason why I brought up the Freemason connection with the designer of the Statue of Liberty is that there's a second Freemason sculptor by the name of Horatio Greenough, who is also contracted to make a very important symbolic statue for America, that being the statue of George Washington. But this isn't the only interesting statue that he made. He was also known for having sculpted a statue that he called Lucifer. And let me show you what it looks like. I was floored when I first saw this, because it's possible that the great female sculptor Harriet Hosmer, she may have been inspired by this Freemason sculptor, because 13 years later, in 1854, she made this sculpture that she called Medusa, which also resembles the Statue of Liberty. The Freemason-inspired sculptor Horatio Greenough was initially criticized for his controversial George Washington statue, and today it's often compared to Baphomet, the occult deity. Notice the position of George Washington's hands. In addition to that, notice that Baphomet is depicted with a moon, a goat's head, the torch of enlightenment, wings, as well as intertwining snakes. Not to mention that Baphomet is actually a personification of both sexes, as he's often depicted with women's breasts. Ha, you see? The Statue of Liberty is also possibly a combination of two sexes. What's more, the Roman goddess Cybele, who was suspected to be the Statue of Liberty, is symbolized with a torch and the moon. What you may not realize is that in antiquity, the same god that was symbolized with a lion, goat, snake, wings, it basically fulfills all the symbols that can be attributed to Baphomet. If your head's not spinning yet, here's where things get really crazy. In antiquity, Cybele was the Roman version of the Greek goddess Rhea, who was mother to Zeus. In the Babylonian Empire, a near identical goddess was called Ishtar. Now take a look at the symbols associated with Ishtar. We have wings, the snake, the lion, and the owl. This is really interesting because in ancient Jewish lore, the same goddess is called Lilith, who is not just described as a screeching owl, but is also the actual talking serpent who offered Eve the apple of good and evil, well, at least in some versions of the Adam and Eve story. In Greek mythology, there's a fire-breathing entity called the Chimera who lives in the underworld and is coincidentally represented by a goat, a lion, and a serpent. Why are these animals so important? Well, these animals also happen to be the same animals that are historically used to describe a dragon. Ishtar was said to have descended to the underworld, though the reasons in terms of the mythology is unknown to historians. Also, the mother of all mothers in Sumerian mythology was called Namu, or Nama, depending how you interpret the sex. But if you remember in my previous episode, we talked about a Dogon tribe who claimed that their original ancestors, their extraterrestrial ancestors, that they came from the Sirius star system. And what were they called? Nomo. Also, the Sirius star system in Egyptian mythology is directly associated with the goddess Isis, which is basically the Egyptian version of the Jewish Lilith or the Babylonian Ishtar, or, as we're trying to make the point, the Statue of Liberty. So what happens when you trace Ishtar all the way to the Sumerian Empire? You actually get a near identical goddess named Inanna. Let me show you what some of the earliest representations of Inanna look like. So, the same goddess will be demonstrated maybe the basis of the symbol of the Statue of Liberty used to look like this, and perhaps was later personified like this, and even like this. If you think that this is too much to believe, consider that some companies that cater to the elites, such as Alfa Romeo, well, they use dragons eating people as their symbol of choice. And just to drop one more interesting coincidence, the architect of the famous GoTo building, which is basically the library in downtown Los Angeles, and kind of looks like an Illuminati pyramid, well, he was also the architect for the Yale fraternity building, Wolf Head, which is the brother fraternity to Skull and Bones. And what exactly is their symbol? Well, it's a wolf's head sitting on top of an ankh, which is the Egyptian symbol of their gods. Look, symbols are important because they occupy our consciousness. Whether we are aware of it or not, our minds are constantly attempting to organize information. If all these symbols regarding the dragons are proliferated throughout the world with little explanation or information as to why it's there, or what its meaning is, or where it comes from, well, that creates a state of uneasiness. It's like a subconscious knot, a feeling that the pieces are just not fitting as correctly as they should. You can call this a form of basic mind control, because that cognitive uneasiness, that makes our mind susceptible to authority. I mean, that's basically the basic premise of hypnotism. We just confuse the mind until it gives in to the voice, just the authority. This is why I wanted to make this episode. I wanted to call out the illuminated ones and allow the masses to be more illuminated and less controlled by the symbols that are being proliferated by these Germanic-based secret societies. I know, this is a heavy episode. I'll try to lighten it up for the next one. But if you did enjoy this episode, please give me a like, or if you haven't subscribed, go ahead and subscribe and make sure you turn on notifications just so that you're aware of the future episodes that I'll be coming out with. Thanks for joining me. This is Felipe Osorio, signing out.